There once was a cobbler called Saunders who died for 11 days. At least that was how his daughter remembered it. In the year 1752 it was announced that the 2nd of September would be followed by the 14th. The matter was merely one of wording, of course. Time and its substance was not to undergo any change. Since this calendrical reform would bring the kingdom of Great Britain in line with its neighbors at last, would a price a brief inconvenience, a touch of confusion. London newspapers printed witty verses about the annihilation of time, but no one doubted the government's weighty reasons, nor did anyone think to explain them to persons of no importance, such as Cobb Saunders. He knew this much. Injustice had been done. There were 11 days of chiseling shoe leather he'd never be paid for. 11 dinners snatched away before they reached his lips. 11 nights when he was going to be cheated out of the sweet relief of dropping down on his straw mattress. On September the 14th, New Style, as they called it, Cobb Saunders woke up with a hammering head and knew that 11 days of his life had been lost. Stolen, rather, cut out of his allotted span, the way you might nick a wormhole out of an apple. He had no notion how those days had been done away with, or how he might fetch them back. His head was fit to spit when he tried to figure it out. He was a man 11 days nearer to his death, and there was nothing he could do. But perhaps there was. When the calendar riots began, though Cobb had no part in the starting of them, he joined in with all the breath he had. Tossing his rage under the general bonfire, the cry went up, "Give us back our 11 days!" The government was merciful. Cobb Saunders wasn't executed. He died of ghoul fever. Christmas came 11 days early that year. The clamor of church bells pulled the air as taut as catgut, and the cobbler's 5-year-old daughter, Mary, knelt below the window, watching for snow that never fell. 11 years later, Mary Saunders was back on her knees, herself in gaol. Like father, like daughter. The night room in Monmouth gaol was 22 feet long and 15 feet wide. She'd measured it by pacing her first night. 4 walls and no windows. Here the men and women awaiting trial at the spring sessions lived like rats. Some were chained up after sunset, but not necessarily the murderers. There was no rhyme or reason to it that Mary could see. Anything she learned could happen in the darkness. Rapes and only a hiss for breath. Blows and no sound but the slap of meat. There was no straw provided. So shit piled high in the corners. The air was as thick as earth. One morning an old Welshman was found face down, unmoving, but nothing could shock Mary Saunders any more. She wouldn't let anything touch her now. It had been worse back in September when mosquitoes sang in the night heat and the guards didn't bring any water. Once before dawn it had rained so hard that water leaked through the cracked ceiling, and the prisoners laughed like hoarse lunatics and licked the walls. Now it was Christmastide, and in the gaol's day room Mary Saunders sat on her feet like a carving hour after hour. If she didn't move, she wouldn't feel. Her palms rested on the rough brown dress the gaolers had given her 3 months before. It felt like sacking stiff with dust. Her eyes latched under the barred square of window, followed the crows wheeling across the white frosty sky towards the Welsh border. Her ears took account of their mockery. The other prisoners had learned to treat the London girl as if she weren't there. Their filthy songs were inaudible to her. Their gossip was a foreign language. Their couplings meant no more to her than the scratch of mice. If thrown dice happened to clatter against her knees, she didn't flinch. When a boy stole the blue-edged bread out of her hand, Mary Saunders only contracted her fingers and shut her eyes. She was going to die in gaol, just like her father. Until the morning, she felt a light tug in her chest, as if her heart were starting to unravel. Gin clouded the air. She opened her eyes to see a purse snatch with only one sleeve stooped over her, delicately pulling a faded red ribbon out of Mary's stays. "That's mine," said Mary, her voice hoarse with disuse. With one hand she seized the ribbon, and with the other she took hold of the old woman by the soft part of the throat. She tightened her grip on the gray, jowlish flesh while the thief choked and wrenched herself away. Mary let her go and wiped her hand on her skirt. Then she wound the ribbon round her thumb till it made a hard, rusty-colored ring and tucked it back down her stays where it belonged.